Okay, so our speaker today is Jim McFarlin, a former Air Force officer and high-tech CEO. Took the reins of the Air and Space Forces Association of Palm Springs as its president in 2004. And just as the U.S. Air Force moved to a larger mission beyond flight and into space and cyber, Jim is heavily involved in the chapter's growing youth cyber education initiative, which launched last year to great success. It involves all three school districts and has received the support of both Congressman Calvert and Congressman Rees. Jim is currently an author, speaker, and thought leader on cyber warfare, whose novel Aftershock, a novel, was an Amazon Pick of the Month on its release and has been widely read internationally, particularly in China. I'm sure you have some interesting stories about that. Jim currently serves as chairman of the board of the World Affairs Council of the Desert. So without further ado, Jim McFarlin.
I don't need that.
Yes. And you can use that one up there.
Okay. What's this? It's okay. Doesn't work. Okay. Gotcha. Good morning, everyone. Well, I don't have anything quite as exciting as the first tale that we've heard today, but I will do my best. Looking at our announcement today, Jim argues that it is not only possible that a new era of national defense policy is about to begin, it is an absolute necessity. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I want to touch a little bit about what's going on in cyberspace, artificial intelligence attacks, and the state of our cyber command. And so I think all of you know this, cyberspace is a battle, it is an active battle space. We are in active conflict constantly from a number of enemies, primarily China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and a whole bunch of cyber criminals around the earth.
Closer to the mic.
Closer? Okay. So unfortunately, we are losing that battle, or most of those battles, and you all don't follow this like I do, but the breaches every year, I just saw the latest Homeland Security reports, the breaches every year are just going up 30, 40, 50% on our networks. And we are not doing a really good job in protecting those. We're not doing a good job at all, to be honest. And where the problem comes in is our enemies, our adversaries can see that. They can see exactly what's happening. And it emboldens them. I'm talking about primarily now geopolitical talk, China and Russia, to do things that are starting to scare us. And I think those of you who had a chance to see the Christopher Wray interview, or actually testimony at Congress with regard to what China did in our telecom networks, that is just the tip of the iceberg. And I suggested that you see that for a couple of reasons. One is that attack on our telephone networks was made possible without us knowing at all that it had occurred. We found out months and months later. And secondly, not only did they eavesdrop, infiltrate a lot of information from telephone conversations, but China also left, I guess you'd call them tripwires, throughout our telephone networks, meaning that at some point, if they decided they could interrupt the communications network. They also did the same thing with the power networks. Now, China is interesting. Typically, they disavow any knowledge of anything like this. They say they don't believe in cyber attacks. However, in this one case, in a meeting and just at the end of the Biden administration with some Biden officials, December 2024, China admitted that they did it. It's the first time I've ever seen anybody admit to doing anything on the internet. And so I think that shows a certain amount of confidence on their part that they can do things to the United States in cyberspace and get away with it, because the response was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. So we are dealing with China now in what I call, I guess I'll call it a cyber, well, let's call it a hockey stick moment, where the level of attacks from China, geopolitical attacks, Russia primarily, are on the increase, but with the advent of these new AI-driven weapons, we have just seen a tremendous uptick in what we're going to be experiencing in the future. The problem we have is that we have been somewhat lax in our defense. It's been kind of a reactive defense. It has not been active, not been proactive. And so these attacks will continue. The question that so many ask is that how can the United States of America, the most powerful nation on earth, the most technologically advanced nation on earth, the creator of the internet, the creator of modern artificial intelligence, put itself in a position where we cannot even defend ourselves against an environment that we created? And that is the answer that eludes us and has eluded us for some time. The fact is that we have been behind the 8 ball on cyber defenses since, I'll say 2008, 20 years. And I say 2008 because that's when it was noticed that the Chinese have been stealing tremendous amounts of our intellectual property, including, for example, the F-35 plans, which came out as the J-20. And we had done nothing to stop it. At the same time, Russia also was able to infiltrate our Department of Defense systems. And at that point, some officials had had enough. And that was the beginning of the Cyber Command. Cyber Command stood up in 2010 with General Keith Alexander was in charge. It was under the Strategic Command in the Air Force. And the job was to build from scratch without any people, without any experience, without any game plan, except a mission, and it's to stop these attacks. Which did not happen. It was a very difficult job, if you can imagine, because just the personnel resources to pull them in to do this work, it's very hard to find people. So in 2018, General Paul Nakasone took over the Cyber Command. He took stock of things and he immediately made a comment that stands out. He said that the US is the punching bag of the internet. And of course, here's a man who's charged with stopping that. And he went on to say later on that the reason our adversaries attack us is because they don't fear us. And that goes back to our passive response posture, which goes back to the title here, what is our policy for response? If China or Russia had made physical attacks, there would certainly be a response. If they made one in cyberspace, there is nothing. So the problem with that is that it emboldens future conflict. It keeps going on. So General Nakasone evidently saw that the Cyber Command was unable to fulfill its mission. It was not organized properly. The fourth generation forces getting workers was not working. And so he proposed a new structure called Cybercom 2. And as he was finishing his tour, he briefed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on this plan, who bought off on it and handed it off to Defense Secretary Hegseth, who gave the Department of Defense 45 days to evaluate Cybercom 2 and come back with recommendations. And this was a rework from scratch for something that had been created 14 years earlier. The review was done 45 days. And at that point, they said, we've got to rework the whole plan from start. So from the time that General Nakasone decided that he needed to do Cybercom 2.0 and get it sold, which was probably in the 2016 range, to 2025, those modernization plans went nowhere. They went nowhere. The only thing that went was the attacks continued. So we don't know what's happened. General Nakasone handed off the command to Air Force General Timothy Ha, who lasted about 13 months before he was sacked by our president for whatever reason. I don't know. And now we have an acting commander. So you see part of the pattern here is that we've got a cyber command that has problems with fourth generation. They can't get the people they want from the other services who are trained, who will stay in the services that are in sufficient numbers to execute their mission. And yet the plan for remodeling, if you want to call it that, for the cyber command, is stalled somewhere. And I'll go back to one thing that I saw something about General Nakasone a few days ago, reminded me he really sounded like when he took over that he was going to be a positive force for offensive action. Because there's different strategies you can use to respond to cyber attacks. We have been following what some call the Mr. Rogers approach. You know, let's be nice to them. Let's not upset them. We don't want to escalate this conflict. We'll talk about it. Much preferred is the Dirty Harry approach, which some like, which is don't you dare, because we will make sure that you pay. Or if you go crazy, you could go to the Mad Max approach. Nothing against Max here. And I think if we were in that mode, there would certainly be a lot of people fearing us in cyberspace because they haven't had quite an idea at all what we were going to do. Now, the hockey stick problem is this. All these AI tools that you hear about, all the development, all the new data centers, all the money that's going into AI is for a reason. It's because it's a very, very powerful software. And when applied to cyber attacks, here's what it does. A normal attack takes a team of people, weeks, months to plan, execute. An AI attack, like one that just happened 2 weeks ago, is done in minutes or seconds. And so we find ourselves responding to not only many more of those, but also to more sophisticated attacks. And it's a situation that if we don't get ahead of the game, we're going to be in trouble because whatever defenses we have are not going to work at all under this new mode. So we have got to get Cyber Command staff, we've got to get the organization, and say we, part of defense, gets it organized in a way that it is effective, and they need to have policies for defense that make our enemies fear us. And if we don't pull that off, it's very possible that we could lose our position of dominance in the world to China if they in fact beat us in the AI race. And so you hear a lot about, or you may, about China wanting to have superiority over the United States. President Xi said by 2030. And that dominance basically means they would, if we didn't have equivalent or greater AI expertise, that means that they would control our networks, communications, power, transportation, everything down the lines, and we couldn't stop them. So those are the risks, and that's where we stand. I wish it were better news. I will say this, from a force standpoint, our Air Force Association, as mentioned, we do have a high school program for the Coachella Valley to get students interested in IT and cyber and encourage them to go on to college. This program did start last year with 27 students. We conducted a cyber camp this last summer in partnership with Cal State San Bernardino. And we are currently in the middle of the second year of that program. And it is our desire that we will get these young people interested in technology, get them into higher education, get them into the cyber world, and perhaps even into the academy, and help get people, because there are there's about a 500,000 people shortage in cybersecurity people in the United States. The unemployment rate for cybersecurity is 0. And I tell these students, I said, if you want a guaranteed future, a guaranteed prosperous future, and keep in mind, a lot of our local students, I mean, they come from families that don't have much. I really feel for them. I know so many of these students now, and they don't have cars. They don't have college savings accounts. Some of them don't even have computers. And here is something that can put them into a really good life. And also, the young people like playing with computers. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about getting on there and playing for real. So we are working, our chapter is working to expand this program. It is self-funded. We do not get funds from the Air Force Association, Air and Space Forces Association nationally. This is done locally. Fortunately, we have both congressmen on board. We'll see what happens next year, but they are very actively supporting this. The school district are actively supporting this. And I think it is at least what we can do to help get some individuals in for training that could get into the Cyber Command, or at least cyber defenses in the government at some point in time. Because it comes down to this: if we don't, I mean, this is my opinion, so I kind of hesitate, but if we don't have that superiority in artificial intelligence, and China does, I think it could be a lot worse than just having the telecom systems down. It could be much, much worse. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. So anyway, that's the landscape. I'm open for questions. I wish I had a more positive story, like a successful landing. But if we are, Colonel Lilac.
Yeah, Jim. I know a lot about your efforts and applaud you for all of those. We're sitting here as a bunch of old pilots. And I don't know the square root of Fox Alpha about the telecom attack. So what do we here in the valley, if we were getting, if our airplanes were being hit, our bases were being hit with a real kinetic attack, we would see it, we would know that we would probably do something about it. But we don't know what's the impact on us sitting here in the valley of the telecom attack, or later on the hockey stick accelerated AI attack. What do we see? Anything? Or is it just take an F-35, steal the planes and turn it into a J-20? Is it all in that world?
No, good question, Bob. The way we feel it is on the telecom side, you don't have any telecommunications. There is
I didn't
none.
know. Did we?
There is none.
I don't know. How many people here heard of the telecom attack before?
Yeah, not that many. And I'm saying if China took the option to execute those tripwires, they could disrupt the entire communication system, which means your phone, mine's over there, is not going to be active. If they did it against the power system, these lights would not be on. If they did it against the power system for gas, that breakfast would not be warm. If they did it against transportation, the airport would be closed, just like Atlanta was closed a few weeks ago, and many airports in Europe were closed several weeks ago because of the control systems were all frozen.
You'd have no credit card activity either nationwide. It was shut down, so you couldn't have any consumption whatsoever except for cash, if you stop this economy.
And that's a huge economic impact to this country. Yes, sir.
Everything will be affected. If you're not, you might not be thinking only just telephone, it's way more than telephones, water systems. They shut down all the water systems, they control everything, everything's done by computer nowadays. We're totally analog, it won't be nothing digital function. We got to go back to horse and buggy or plow. So,
Yeah.
It's more than that, who's might be interrupted everything.
Well, no, that's correct. And it essentially comes down to our modern way of life. Our modern way of life is powered by those networks. We created those networks. Our private enterprise uses those networks to do power, electricity, communications, transportation. Hospitals are huge targets, hundreds and hundreds, where the hospital is just closed down. All the emergency patients are sent elsewhere. All new admissions are refused. Everybody else is sent home. They don't know what the patient's test results are. They don't know what the medications are. They don't know anything. It's all done with paper and pencil and candlelight. And that has happened numerous times. And it's at Hollywood Memorial Hospital. It can hit our law enforcement. Riverside County Sheriff's Department was hit. We're going back 3 or 4 years with what's called ransomware. Their systems were frozen and they had to pay a ransom to get their systems back. And they paid $4.1 million. And after 6 weeks, they still weren't back because there's just so much trouble to recover. And you can go down the list where the society, it's kind of like, remember that movie in 1951, The Day the Earth Stood Still? All right, well, that had to do with atomic war, but it's kind of like that. Everything stops. Everything stops. Now, I mean, to some people, they say, well, if my wife can't use her credit card, maybe that's a real plus.
Nice to see you, Jim. When you think about the quantum world and where we're at in quantum processing, do you feel that, and I know that it leaps and bounds exponentially, and that in its relationship with AI. Do you feel that quantum in our, here in the United States and our research will help bring us abreast of the rest of the world in that cyber warfare arena? Can you comment on what you know about quantum and how it could help us?
Sure, sure. But you can look at quantum like you can AI. It's an opportunity and it's a threat. And so I don't think we should assume that our advances in quantum, which is a major leap forward in computer architecture, would be alone. I think China is certainly there, right up with us, for sure. And quantum requires tremendous amounts of cold, operates below 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Very sophisticated equipment, which is in, there's test sites up. They're not productive yet. So we're looking at 2030, 2033, something like that. Probably the most innovative idea I heard was yesterday. Elon Musk was being interviewed with Jason Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA. And Elon says he believes the future for computing lies in quantum computers in space, because you don't have to pay to cool them, because it's already cool. You don't have to pay for energy, because you can have solar arrays. Cost of solar up there is zero. And everything can be transmitted back and forth seamlessly to the Earth. And he didn't mention it, but he has the rockets to get it up there.
Yeah. I got one more for you. What is as the administration take the bull by the horns? You gave a very bleak story of what's been going on, but is it getting better? Are we starting to go offensive, or what's the policy? Where's the policy going currently?
Unknown. Now, I saw a presentation 2 days ago, virtually, by a gentleman Shane Kane Cross, who is the National Cyber Director at the White House. And he was asked that very question. And in fact, I think it was more poised, will we be more offensive in the future with this administration, knowing kind of the tone of the administration being offensive about everything. And he sidestepped this, and he's at the policy level. I think when you're at Cyber Command, you're not talking policy, you're executing policy, as you know. So here is the policy person who talks to the president about, do we respond like Dirty Harry? Do we respond like Mad Max? Do we not respond? And he would not say. So I was hoping for something more than that. Didn't have it.
Two things. One is as frightening as this is, the one why I'm just learning about it. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room that feels that way as well. Second thing is just to put in a book written by a Chinese national who grew up in Canada and the United States, who compares fundamentally the differences of the way China is run and the way the United States is run. I think it's called Breakout, and it talks about how China's public build of all engineers, engineers are trained to get shit done, and 50% of our Congress lawyers, of course, they're trained to argue, and that is impeding our ability to get things done.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the first question is why is this not commonly known?
This story?
Your story.
This story. Well, let's say I've given 132 talks over the last 10 years. And I will say that the first talk I gave was in Rancho Mirage to a group of city officials and saying, as far as your emergency preparedness, you might want to consider some emergency preparedness for what we just talked about. No lights, no communications, no power, nothing. And one of the councilmen, I heard it was a small room, there's 12 people in there. One of the councilmen leaned over to the other and he whispered, "This is science fiction." So I didn't sell many books that day. Yeah, but let me just say one more thing about the China thing. My book was brought up. I have a professional associate who, at the time my book came out, he was working 6 months in China, 6 months here. He's an American company. And he sent me the promotion for my book in China. The cover is just like it is in English. The inside was all translated. And he said it was selling well. I wouldn't know. For some reason it caught on. Now, the book is about what is the US response to cyber attacks against our power grid. So it's fiction. There's a lot of fact in there, the doomsday plane and stuff like that. But it is a fictional story. But then I guess some of the Chinese drew some enlightenment from it. Yes.
First of all, thank you very much. That was as enlightening as it was frightening. One thing you said that really smart. I've dabbled in this field that has to do with the employment level in cyber.
Yes.
Just one thing that insight that I received, there are two sides to the cyber wars, the offensive and the defensive side. The offensive side is very exciting and it's very visible and you can see results. One of the reasons people have a reluctance to get into the defensive side is that it's an incredibly thankless job. If you do it with 100% effectiveness, not only does nobody know that or acknowledge it, but it can even backfire. And the one story that illustrates this is if you remember Y2K, everybody was afraid when the calendars turned over to 2000. Computer systems were going to go nuts because they were using 2-digit years. I wrote about 24 of those systems, so I'm familiar with that. The country spent billions of dollars and billions of man hours trying to fix that problem. It was the most fantastically successful effort. And sure enough, one congressman rose up and said, "Hey, why did we spend all that money and all that manpower? Nothing happened." And this is the problem with the defensive side.
Yeah, it's very tough. Yeah, and I have talked with hackers about who work both sides. They work offensive, they work defensive. They say they would much prefer to be offensive because it's much easier. You can keep trying and keep trying. The defensive people, you don't know where it's coming from, when it's coming, what it looks like, how to deal with it. Everyone is a surprise. So the offense is a lot more fun. And that's where a lot of really talented people end up. You make a lot of money there. And defense, the problem is there's too many holes in the dike. You can't cover them all. And you can do 100% or 99% is not successful. It will not work. And speaking of 100%, our cyber command, again, 2010, it's now 2025, 15 years, just in the last month or two has received its foundational readiness certificate. In other words, that is the minimum resource requirements needed to conduct their mission. So after 15 years, they finally reached the minimum levels. And some congressman I saw, he says, "How are we supposed to fight anybody with the minimal levels? We need maximum levels." And that is not only resources, it's the methods that they use and the equipment that they have. So I'm sorry if this is I mean, I'm not sorry it's disturbing, but I wish it were more positive. I wish I could tell you that, look, the Cyber Command looks like it's going to come out of this reorganization. And it's going to be a AI first Cyber Command. It's going to be fully staffed. It's going to be fully funded, and it's going to just kick the hell out of the Chinese. I don't know any of that. I know nothing. I'll report back if I hear.
Actually, this is Ron. I have a question for you, offensive versus defensive. The people that I have talked with suggest that we have tremendous offensive capability, but we'd rather not show that. It's almost like a chess game. We could take out the queen immediately But if we show that we have that capability, they don't know, and then they know what we have versus being passive and ineffectual, like you say. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Oh, that's true. Now, if you look at the Cyber Command, the Cyber National Missions Force, which is part of it, is the offensive unit. And they have, I guess, two primary missions. One is they protect all of the Department of Defense information networks, all 15,000 of them. And they do a good job. They do a good job. And if you've ever tried, if you're on active duty and you're trying to get into the internet, it's really, really difficult. Everything is really locked down in the military. The other thing is that they work, the mission force works with foreign governments. They've done a lot of work with Ukraine to help them shore up their cyber defenses. Finland, a lot of the NATO countries, a lot of work to do that. Unfortunately, while they were doing that, the Chinese were hacking our telecom system. And I've never understood that aspect, to it. I don't know if that answered your question.
It's more about how we use our offense versus not using our offense.
Well, that's right. And one element, I think if you're in the Mr. Rogers mode, you're going to be risk averse. We've been more in that mode than we have been Dirty Harry. And if you're risk averse, you don't want to show your hand. If you don't want to show your hand, you say, I'm not going to do an attack against the Chinese because I don't want to show them what we can do. Certainly we have capabilities. I mean, probably some of the best. There's 2,000 cyber technicians on the mission force. A lot of people. They come from the Air Force, the Navy, Army, the Marine Corps. They all have different recruiting standards, different training standards, different promotion standards, different, everything, which makes it very difficult to manage, which is one thing that they want to change. And there are a number of people, Congress included, some people in Congress, that say we need a cyber force, just like the Air Force in 1947, just like the Space Force in 2018. We need a standing force just that does their own staffing, their own training, their own promotion, their own retention, and their own style of doing business. And that is under discussion. Nothing is done. So
I got a question for you too. I worked in cyber for about 10 years, and back in those days, the NSA was really the tip of the spear. So how does the NSA integrate with what you're talking about with the Cyber Command?
I'm sorry, who are you talking about?
NSA.
Oh, NSA. Okay, so the good question. The cyber commander is a double-headed commander and also heads the NSA. One person, two jobs. And some people say split them apart, some say leave it together. But there's a tight, I understand it. There's a tight relationship between the intelligence that the NSA provides and the use of cyber defense or offense. And if they're together, you don't have to call over to another organization, get a hold of the commander and say, let's have a meeting and discuss what we want to, you just do it. And so that, whether that will continue with Cybercom 2 or the Cyber Core or whatever happens, is your guess as good as mine. But right now, it makes sense.
Any other questions?
Is there a Billy Mitchell of cyber? 1925, he took a fall for it. Is
Yeah.
not Sony still talking out loud?
He is. Yeah, he is. I don't know publicly what his latest is, but yeah, he seemed to have, if you look at the cyber commanders, he seemed to have the most perception about what was going on. Nothing against Alexander. I mean, he was trying to put the thing together from scratch. Nothing against Timothy Ha. He wasn't there long enough to know where the coffee is. I mean, he was shown the door. So, yeah.
Couple problems. One is the DoD is protecting their networks, right? Who's protecting with the network, the telephone network, is not controlled, it's not controlled by the DoD. Whose networks are
Okay, okay. In fact, the Department of Defense is protected by the cyber command. And they have their own defenses, as you know, as do all the services. What you just mentioned is a big flaw here in everything, and that is the telecoms, the power companies, they're all owned by private organizations. And so we can't make them do anything in terms of you should have these standards. Now, Homeland Security puts out standards and said you should have these standards, you know, and there's no enforcement. So unless the power company, unless the water company, unless the telecoms are using the same standards of defense that we use for the DoD, they get nothing out of it. And that is a huge weakness in our government. If you go to China, everything's state-owned, that's not a problem. They do what they're told.
Well, it's a little bit about an open society. I mean, the reason that China doesn't want, we're the punching bag, because we're the open society, right?
Yes.
So they've been attacking Microsoft Azure this week, last week actually, and Amazon Cloud, right? So they know they can get into very few of these cloud computing platforms and wreak total hat copies.
Yes.
And they have. But the Cisco's, the network providers, the code providers and writers are not DoD controlled.
Oh.
And so it's really, the DoD does a fabulous job of what's under this line. It's the other line that's going to cause the problems. It has.
That's true. Well, and to add to that a little bit, thank you for that. There's an organization in Homeland Security called Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, which some call CISI, because they're not very effective. Now, CISA has two jobs. Their first job is to protect the civilian departments of the government. Civilian, not the DoD. They do a good job. The second is to work with the private companies and get them to adhere to their standards, their recommendations, et cetera. Now that organization, and Bob Lilac, you sent me a note on this 6 months ago, about half of it was gutted with the new administration. And that sounds bad in the news, but in fact, they were pursuing things that were not to that mission. They were not pursuing anything that was helping the private companies. And so those people had to go. I don't know who's going to replace them. I don't know what their policies, I don't know what their marching orders are. But we have a weak link there, very much. So we'll have to go back to what? Deterrence. And you have to go back so that even if Con Ed doesn't protect itself and they get taken down, Southern California out, lights out, that whoever did that pays a price from the National Missions Force. And that is the deterrent. And that is a deterrent that we're not using.
Yeah, any other questions?
Sorry.
No, you're great. Thank you very much for your time.